Hello friends, my name is Dr. David Litwa, and in this channel I explore the ways of ancient gnosis, early esoteric forms of Christianity, mystery cults, magic, and more. You can find much more similar content on my Patreon. See the link in the description. Today I'd like to present the scholarly options for understanding the ancient esoteric name of BARBELO. BARBELO is arguably the first ancient mother goddess known to Christianity, and she was a member of a primal trinity making up a nuclear family of father, mother, and child. But her name remains a mystery, and despite its abundant appearances in so-called Scythian Christian literature, we still do not know what it means. But there have been many proposals, and in this session, I endeavor to go through them one by one to help you understand where this name might have come from and what it means. So let's take a brief look at how BARBELO is spelled. BARBELO usually ends with a vowel or a long O, what the Greeks called the omega or the big O. But interestingly, in the version of the Secret Book of John in Nag Hammadi Codex 3, BARBELO has a final nu or N attached to her name, and its significance is unknown, but she is known exclusively in that codex as Barbelon. It is indisputably a foreign word and a foreign sounding word to the Greeks, but whether the word comes from Coptic or some kind of Semitic language is as yet unclear. It was F.C. Burkett who, in his book The Church in Gnosis, back in the early 1930s, suggested that BARBELO came from a Coptic word, belbilla, meaning seed. One might argue that she is the seed of the all. She is explicitly called the womb of the all. But this particular etymology has not proved convincing because she is never explicitly called seed, to my knowledge, in any ancient text. Bentley Leighton, in the late 1980s, in his book The Gnostic Scriptures, suggested another Coptic etymology, namely beer, which would mean something like projectile or emission, and he somewhat more hesitantly proposed berber, here a verb meaning to boil over or overflow. This etymology makes a little bit more sense because BARBELO is an emanation or emission, if you will, from the invisible spirit, also known as the Father. But as far as I can tell, Leighton's proposals have not had much traction in scholarship. And most scholars, as it turns out, prefer a derivation from some Semitic language, whether it be Aramaic or Hebrew, probably because there are so many Semitic or Semitizing names in the Secret Book of John and other books of Scythian Christian literature. Hans Liesegang has suggested what may be the most popular or prevalent view about the origins of BARBELO's name. He suggests a Hebrew etymology, be'arba'elo, which would mean something like in the four is God. And It is the case that if you look at the secret book of John, Barbelo does ask for permission for 4 attendants, and she receives these 4 attendants so as to make up a pentad, that is a group of 5. But she is associated with a group of 4. The idea of fourness might also be traced back to the Tetragrammaton, which literally is the 4-letter name, Yod He Vav He, often pronounced Yahweh in English. This is the name of God, and it would be logical for Barbelo, who is the direct emanation of God, to be called by the name of God. And in the Gospel of Truth, at least, the name of God is shared by the Son. In Sethian literature, to my knowledge, a form of the Tetragrammaton is never applied to her. The Dutch scholar Quispel, in the mid-20th century, suggested the name Chaberbal, which again goes back to Hebrew words. This would mean something like companion of the Lord or friend of the Lord. I guess, in some sense, Barbelo is the companion of the Lord, here meaning the invisible spirit. But it doesn't seem like a particularly precise name for her. And actually, Lord, here represented by Baal, is never a name for the Father or the invisible spirit. It is normally Yaldabaoth, the lower creator, who gets to call himself Lord or Master. They are the same word, going back to the same Semitic root, Baal. So this proposal has definitely not received much traction. In the early 80s, Simone Pont, a French scholar who wrote A Separate God, which was translated into English in 1990, summarized on my Patreon, she proposed that Barbelo goes back to an Aramaic root, bar bel, which would mean son of the Lord or son of the husband. Petremont is aware that Barbelo is typically conceived of as a feminine entity, but she hastily points out that Barbelo is male and female, and that is her consistent presentation. She is androgynous or dual-gendered, so there would, in effect, be no objection to calling her a son, and she is, as an emanation of the Father, something like a son. If she is conceived of as having the Father as her partner, then she might be called son of the husband. And Petremont cites a saying from the Nag Hammadi book called Thunder, in which the female revealer uses such language in reference to herself. Petremont's proposal really isn't new, because all the way back in 1739, Isaac de Boso also proposed a very similar etymology, bar Baal, which would mean son of the Lord. So, all in all, this is one of those possible etymologies, but it doesn't really seem to precisely designate Barbelo. She is, in some sense, offspring, but offspring really is different than an emanation. And since we already have an offspring or son of the Father deity in Christ, who is the third member of the Sethian Christian Trinity, it would be somewhat redundant for Barbelo to be called Son of the Lord. And also, I don't much like it because, again, the Father deity or invisible spirit is never called Lord. If we turn over to the Greek Magical Papyri, or PGM for short, we do see some actual usage of divine names that sound a bit like BARBELO, but are not exact matches. So, for instance, in PGM 12.157, we have bar by oak, however you want to pronounce that. Your guess is as good as mine. Bar by oak isn't BARBELO, but of course it sounds a bit like it. In this case, we appear to have a serpent-faced deity who is associated with the creator Ptah. So, in terms of this particular deity, it's probably male and doesn't really have the attributes of BARBELO. In what is now PGM 5A1, we have the name BARBELO, or Helios BARBELO, which would indicate that this deity is a sun deity. Again, from what we know, or what we can gather from the spell, this is the name of a deity familiar to the ritual practitioner, but it's not obviously an exact match. And in terms of the attributes of this particular deity, there doesn't seem to be much overlap with BARBELO. At the same time, it does appear that, or it is useful, I should say, to know that ancient ritual practitioners who used these spells did use names that sounded like BARBELO, and to them they sounded like foreign names, and these foreign names were divine names or secret divine names, and they were names of power. In the present context, it's still difficult to know exactly where the names came from, whether they were thought to be native Egyptian words or native Semitic words. We really don't know. But such overlapping words do explain why later Christian interpreters like Origen claimed that the names of the Sethian Christian deities came from magical spells. That may in fact not be the case. There is no exact overlap, but one can see how one might come to that conclusion. So those are the scholarly options and the texts that scholars point to for trying to understand the name BARBELO. And I think it's important just to say here that the name remains a mystery. Scholars haven't figured it out, and whoever invented the name would probably enjoy that fact. It is a secret and esoteric name, and its root derivation is intentionally veiled or hidden. So this is the situation we're in. Probably what's most helpful in this situation is simply paying attention to the descriptive attributes of BARBELO, such as we have them. Here I'm using the Secret Book of John in Codex 3, which I'm using in my new introduction to the Secret Book. If we look at BARBELO's epithets, we see that she is the power which exists before all things. She's the providence of all, image of the invisible, the eternity which is complete, and the glory which glorifies. Possibly the secret of her name lies in one of these particular attributes. She is, in Neo-Pythagorean terms, the dyad which emerges from the monad. Perhaps there was some attempt to create a Semitic equivalent of the name dyad and name it BARBELO. We don't know, but we might look for Semitic equivalents to terms like power and providence, image, eternity, and glory. And BARBELO's description continues. BARBELO is called the first thought, much like Helen in Simonian theology. She is also the first human, triple male, triple hymned, triple name or named, the triple power, and a male-female eternity. So she has quite a list of names. In other places, she is called the womb or the womb of the all. And She has other names as well. I'm not being exhaustive, but these are the names that seem primary and are first introduced when she appears in the secret book of John, here again, Codex 3. She is the archetypal gender bender. She can be male or female. She is the model of both males and females, the archetypal human, and the mother of all, the mother of all living things. Again, if I were to search for the origins of the name Barbelo, I would seek for Semitic equivalents to some of these terms like thought or human or male female or power or name. The idea that she is triple power, triple name, triple male indicates it's a kind of intensifier, like super in English, the super male, the super name, the super power. And I think this is quite significant. So that, my friends, is my whirlwind introduction to Barbelo and the meaning of her name and the scholarly options which are used to understand her name. I hope that this has inspired you, if not to worship Barbelo, then at least to know more about her and to find out more about her, and maybe to continue the search for the meaning of her name. For in understanding the meaning of her name, we understand more of early Christian theology, the esoteric roots of early Christian Trinitarian speculation, and we get back to the mother of all the living. Thank you for watching.